Administration, Honorable Eriko Yamatani, Chairperson of the Japan Parliamentarian Support Group for Tibet, Honorable Khenpo Sonam Tenphel, and Honorable Domasiring Tekan, Chairperson and Deputy Chair of the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile, and our Chief Guest, Honorable Akiko Santo, former Speaker of the House of Councillors, and the special guest, Honorable Madam Akie Abe, former First Lady of Japan, and Reverend Otani of Higashi Temple, honorable members of Parliament, diplomats, distinguished guests, scholars, activists, media members, and the participants. So I, on behalf of the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile and the Japan Parliamentarian Support Group for Tibet, thank you and welcome you all to this two-day conference. So I am Arya, representative of the Liaison Office of His Holiness Dalai Lama for East Asia, Japan and East Asia. So it is my great honor and pleasure to be the MC of this opening session of the 9th Parliamentarian Convention on Tibet. Japan, as you know, is a land of rising sun. The nation is greatly admired and respected around the world as a responsible nation with the freedom, democracy, and rule of law. So therefore, and Japan has the largest number of parliamentarians supporting the Tibet issue. So it is very much appropriate that that this 9th World Parliamentarian Convention on Tibet is happening in Tokyo. So let us all give a big hand for Japan for making this conference possible in Tokyo. And now, without taking much time, I would like to introduce today's distinguished speaker. And to save time, I'll be introducing only the name and the title. Their profiles are well available in the brochure. So our first speaker is Honorable Madam Eriko Yamatani, Member of Parliament and Chairperson of Japan Parliamentarian Support Group for Tibet, a long-time Tibet supporter and admirer of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Yamatani Sensei, yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
So, Ms. Yamatani, please.
Good morning. Did you sleep well? The 9th World Parliamentary Convention on Tibet. 同時通訳があります。
Since there is simultaneous
第9回
interpretation, I
チベット
would
に
be
関す
speaking
る
in
世界
Japanese.
国
The
会議員
9th
会議開催にあたり
WPCT,
ご協
and
力
in opening of
ご
this
参加くだ
conference,
さいまし
there
た
had been
皆
many
様
people
あ
who
りが
had
とうございます。
cooperated, and there are so many participants. Thank you very much
超党
indeed.
派日
And
本
this is a
チベット国会議
bipartisan
員連盟会長の山谷
caucus,
でござい
and
ま
I
す。
have been involved in this
日本の
group,
議員連盟は
chairperson of the
世
Japan
界
Parliamentary
最大
Support
規
Group
模
for
です。
Tibet. And this caucus is the largest in the world, and this is the 9th WPCT being held.
それまで
And up until now, in Lithuania, Italy,
英国
England, Canada,
ラトビアなど
and
でも
Latvia were the
開催され
places where the
前回
conference had been
一回目は
held. And the
アメリカで
last time, the 8th,
ペロシ
was
下院
held
議長
in the
が
United States,
開催
and
式の
Madam
司会を
Speaker
な
Nancy
さりました。
Pelosi had made a speech.
今回
And this
欧
time,
米チベット代表者
as
議会
the
の主催で
exiled Tibetan
29
government,
カ国
the 29 countries and 130 people are here today. And from each country, the Diet members, NGO members, think tank members, and researchers are gathered here today.
日本は
As for
民
Japan,
主主義
the democracy and the rule of law
国際規範を
and the international norms are being supported,
最も
and
成功した
this is the one of the successful countries in the
ま
world.
た
And also,
教国
as a Buddhist country,
チベットの宗教や
the Tibetan religion and culture
と
are being respected
持
from
つもので
Japan.
あります。一昨年
2 years
日
ago,
本の衆議院と
the Japanese House of Representatives and House of Councillors had Tibet, Uyghur, and Southern Mongolia and Hong Kong's human rights issues were being adopted as a bill. And as for this time, the Tibetan people, and as a Tibetan national, to live in those kind of environment should be respected. So I hope that this conference would be a fruitful one. And I hope this will be a fruitful conference. And as for the Dalai Lama the 14th, next month in July, 6th July, he would be celebrating his 90th birthday. And he had received a Nobel Award, and 36 years have passed since then. And a peaceful contribution had been conducted by him, and the environment in Tibet is in a dire situation. As for the Dalai Lama, in March this year, over 70 years of confrontation between the Chinese government were being reflected in his autobiography, being published several months ago. And in January this year, in his SNS, about this book would become the thinking point and also the dialogue for Tibetan future, is what he had expressed. And he hopes that this would become a framework of the future of Tibet. Human values are being set by him, and nonviolence and ethics education and compassion had been told by the Dalai Lama. And his activities, I think, is very, very much in the respectful nature. And as for the Dalai Lama, in 2018, when he came here in Japan, here in this place, he had spoken as a special guest. And there were more than 100 Diet members had seen his love and world peace. And they had been moved by his wisdom. And as for Tibet, there are many, many rivers, the origin, Mekong, and several big rivers in China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, China, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. So 1.8 billion people are being served by such water from Tibet. And as for natural resources, and rare earth are abundant in Tibet. And it is called the plateau of the world, and it is the reservoir of the world. So protecting Tibet is a very big responsibility for us. As for pollution, we have to take care of the pollution issues. So each country and each ethnic groups and values of theirs are all beautiful and important treasures and should be respected. So Tibetan language and Tibetan Buddhism, over 1,300 years are the history. But now, the Chinese government, as for the Tibetan children, they are being sent to boarding schools and are forced to learn Chinese language and are receiving Chinese language education. So the Tibetan language or the culture or the religion are not being passed on to the next generation. So for the Tibetan people to live as a Tibetan national had become very difficult. The Tibetan people, to live as a Tibetan person, they have the right to do so. The Chinese government, in order to manage such people, they are using AI and barcodes. So repressive environments are being imposed on the people. Around 2018, the Chinese government had been calling the Chinese people are calling Tibet as Xizang, and had been saying that Tibet had been part of China, so they are doing this revisionist history. So under these circumstances, the UN Human Rights Committee had been taking up this issue, and in March this year, the Chinese human rights violations, especially in Tibet, the dire situation is there. And as for the Tibet Autonomous Region, the freedom of expression and religion and freedom of thoughts and minds and Tibetan culture and identity are being eroded. Such kind of education are being imposed. So we need to gather together and confront that. Fake news and information manipulation are also another issue. So Tibetan issues are not the internal affairs of the Chinese, but also it is an international issue. So in real sense, we need to have a dialogue. In China, within Tibetan regions, the United Nations special reporters and NGO activists should be included and being allowed to enter. In 2011, the government in exile in India, I have visited Dharamsala. And according to the election, they have the parliamentary elected members in the government. From the morning, we can hear the Buddhist chants, and I have woken up. The Tibetan Buddhism culture, the beautiful, and should be respected. So many people, I had a chance to talk with many people, and they are very compassionate and thoughtful people. Here, the government in exile, Mr. Tenphel is here today, the Prime Minister, and also the Speaker and the Deputy Speakers are here today. 5 days ago, in 29th of May, Mr. Tenphel, Prime Minister, towards the Diet members of Japan, he had spoken in front of the Diet members, and we have exchanged views. Everybody had been able to understand deeper about the circumstance of Tibet, and we are so heartbroken. The Japanese House of Councillors and House of Representatives Diet members in 2023, Uyghur, Tibet, Southern Mongolia, and Hong Kong's human rights bill had been adopted, and I have spoken that. And such bipartisan people, members, the human rights violation by the China, and there are many Diet members who are active in dealing with that issue. So for the next 2 days, the world's Diet members and the leaders and researchers would have fruitful opinion exchange, and there are many prominent people would be giving discussions and dialogue. So it is a participating style conference, and Tibetan people's human rights, and for them to live as a Tibetan person, we need to have further deepening of the understanding. We should get together and we should lead them to a specific action. So the Tokyo Declaration and Tokyo Action Plan should be adopted. So let's work together. We hope to have the active discussion and deepening of thoughts and to have more hope, and we hope to have your strength as well. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Yamatani Sensei, for your very warm and inspiring welcome speech. Now I would like to request Honorable Khenpo Sonam Tempe, Chairman of the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile, to deliver his welcome address. Khenpo Sonam Tempe, please.
Ninja Chambo Tede Nimi Hizone Melam Chambo Wajato Pegartang Sende Shimido Temba Tuja Jalan Shosum Che Trashidele everyone Konnichiwa Most Honorable Akiko Santo, the Chief Guest Member of the House of Councillors, former Speaker of the House of Councillors, Japan, Honorable Akie Abe, Special Guest, former First Lady and wife of the late former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, Honorable Otani Chunjun, 25th Chief Board of the Higashi Hoenji Temple, Honorable Yamatani Eriko, Chairperson of the Japan Parliamentary Support Group for Tibet, Honorable Yamada Hiroshi, General Secretary of the Japan Parliamentary Support Group for Tibet, Honorable Pemba Tsering, Session of the Central Tibetan Administration, Deputy Speaker Dhammatseri, Minister of Information and International Relations Nonjin Dhamma, Honorable members of the Parliament and dignitaries present here today. It is great honor for me to welcome you all, the distinguished parliamentarians, honorable guests, and media from around the world to the 9th World Parliamentary Convention on Tibet. On behalf of the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to each of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to show your unwavering solidarity and support for Tibet. Due to election and parliamentary session in various parts of the world, many of the lawmakers could not make to this convention. However, many parliamentarians have sent a virtual message to make their presence felt to show their solidarity with Tibet's fight for freedom. We also have some former parliamentarians who are staunch Tibet supporters attend this convention. At this convention, we will feature a heartwarming writing message from His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, a Ido skinny on Tibetan democracy, and compelling first-hand testimony of China's human rights violations shared by former Tibet political prisoner Namshila. Taking this opportunity, I once again would like to thank each one of you for valuable presence here in this convention. The World Parliamentary Convention on Tibet is held mostly every 3 years to actively engage lawmakers of democratic countries to garner coordinated support for Tibet's cause. The first WPCD was held in New Delhi, India in 1994, and the 8th WPCD was held in Washington, D.C., USA in 2022. The then U.S. Speaker, Honorable Nancy Pelosi, Honorable U.S. Representative Jim McGovern, along with around 100 participants from 28 different countries, made their support for Tibet clearly felt during the event. Additionally, a congressional hearing on Tibet was convened by the Congressional Executive Commission on China, where Professor Michael McCaul, Professor of International Law and the Executive President of KARDAC, and Professor Hon Shan Lau, retired chair professor of the City University of Hong Kong, presented their research evidence that historically Tibet was never part of China. In 2024, the U.S. Congress passed the History Reserve Tibet Act. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to the bipartisan members of the Congress for their support of this highly significant legislation. The Act challenges PRC's claim of Tibet being a part of China since ancient times and highlights Tibet's history as an independent nation. This historical fact is clearly outlined in His Holiness Dalai Lama's latest book, Voice for the Voiceless. I would also like to express my gratitude and welcome the Dutch House of Representatives resolution on Tibet this April. Particularly its emphasis His Holiness the Dalai Lama's reincarnation and the appointment of an EU Special Coordinator on Tibet. Following this convention, we hope to see more such resolutions in support of Tibet. Tibet, with its rich religious and cultural heritage and the potential to contribute for the well-being of humanity, is now facing imminent threat of cultural genocide and complete annihilation of its identity on the hands of the Chinese regime. The ecological rich and highly sensitive Tibet plateau is being exploited unbridled with mining and diamond. Tibetan children are deprived of their birthright to learn their mother tongue as they are coerced into colonial boarding schools. Tibetans are denied basic human rights. Political prisoners are subjected to torture and death. China's atrocities are known transcend borders, with numerous reports of its transnational repression being transnational China's atrocity are transcend borders, with numerous reports of its transnational repression been acknowledged and condemned by multiple countries and the international organizations, including Canada, several European nations, and over 15 human rights groups. National Cyber Security Center of United Kingdom has issued an advisory warning against spyware targeting Tibetan, Uyghur, and Taiwanese communities. Meta's latest threat report also highlights China's efforts to target His Holiness Dalai Lama and the Tibetan exile community with misinformation and Chinese propaganda. On March 28, China's State Council Information Office issued yet another white paper on Tibet, asserting CCP's control over the reincarnation of Tibetan lamas, claiming development in Tibet, and accusing His Holiness Dalai Lama and Western nations of attempting to separate Tibet from China. These claims are all concocted to whitewash all inhuman atrocities inside Tibet and to rewrite the history of Tibet to fulfill the expansionist ambition of CCP's Secretary Xi Jinping. The fact is that with stringent and oppressive policy, PRCs had driven the Tibetan to the desperation of self-immolation. Since 2000, 157 known cases of Tibetans from all walks of life have given up their precious life through self-immolation. Against this backdrop, in these 2 days, I'm hoping for active participation from the extent gathering to have discussions not only on countering the challenges posed authoritarian CCP, simultaneously find ways to promote international and diplomatic efforts to make the leadership of CCP take more responsibility to resolve the conflict between Tibet and China to the interest of both Chinese and Tibetans. Here I want to reiterate our commitment to middle way policy, deliberation on understanding Tibet Plateau environmental significance, and the impact of China's extortions of Tibet's environment is equally important to save this earth for all. His Holiness Dalai Lama long wished to have a World Parliamentary Convention on Tibet in Japan. Therefore, I think today we are fulfilling His Holiness' wish. As His Holiness Dalai Lama reaches the momentous milestone of his 90th birthday this year, we are proud to commemorate his remarkable journey and profound impact on the world. This convention will celebrate not only his tireless effort to promote compassion, peace, and human values, but also the enduring legacy he has created over decades of spiritual and humanitarian leadership. Through this tribute, we aim to honor his wisdom, resilience, and unwavering commitment to the betterment of humanity. I conclude my talk with the hope that this convention will serve as a catalyst, inspiring greater passion and commitment among decision makers to support Tibet. We call on all of you to be outspoken about the pressing issue facing Tibet in your respective countries. I thank our co-host, all-party Japanese Parliamentary Support Group for Tibet's pivotal role in making this convention happen here in Tokyo. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Khenpo Sonam, for your detailed explanation about the Tibetan situations. Now, I would like to invite our chief guest, Honorable Akiko Santo, Member of Parliament, former Speaker of House of Councillors. Santo Sensei, please.
この席に立ちますと、1
Standing
年前
at this podium
数々の
reminded me back in 7 years ago,
厳しい抵抗の中、
I was very active against the very condemnation, and we reminded me of his visit, his Holiness visit to Japan back in 7 years ago. Today, once again,
重要な皆様方をお迎え
such a very important moment in Tibet, having delegates here in Tokyo to convene this conference. I would like to extend the congratulations with all the Diet members with me today. Despite his effort by His Holiness, still situation is very difficult. Pressure from the Chinese government and also in Tibet. The death of many people in Tibet, culture and history, and also language is in a very dear situation, or at the brink of extinction. So all our countries need to be united to support people in Tibet so that they will eventually regain peaceful environment. So today, for other businesses, I need to excuse myself from this meeting today, but by having fruitful exchanges to deepen the relationship further, and politicians in Western sphere should join the effort to work together to address the situation in Tibet, to regain the peaceful daily life for Tibet. I know it will be very difficult, but we should work together, working together with Ms. Eriko Yamatani and all Diet members in Japan. We will work together with you. With that, I will conclude my remark. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Santo Sensei, for your warm message and for your continued support for Tibet. Now, we have with us Honorable Madam Akie Abe, former First Lady of Japan and a great friend of His Holiness Dalai Lama and Tibet. Madam Abe, please.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much indeed for your kind introduction. My name is Akie Abe. With regard to Tibet, this is the 9th WPCT, and this is now being held in Tokyo and in Japan. I would like to convey my heartwarming thank you and gratitude to all those people who had worked so hard. My late husband, around 3 years ago, had passed away, and His Honorable Holiness Dalai Lama had sent a very heartwarming message, and also had sent a little Buddha statue. In front of my late husband's photograph, I have that statue, and every day I pray for him. My late husband, during the meeting with the various country members with regard to Tibet and also the abduction issue of the North Korea, had conveyed a message, and that is the human rights. And he had always said that human rights should be respected. And when he left as a prime minister for the first time, we wanted to meet Dalai Lama, and we had a chance to visit India, so I wanted to visit His Holiness. And during that time, by coincidence, His Holiness was on his way to the United States and would be visiting Japan. So we had an opportunity to meet him. And since I was to meet His Holiness, that information was being known by the Chinese embassy, and the embassy said no, and they had given a pressure, and I really realized what the situation was. But in the Narita Airport, near Narita Airport, I was able to meet His Holiness and had received a very heartwarming words from him. So people in Tibet are now in a very, very hard situation. And my husband was always thinking what he could do for that situation. And as for myself, I would like to inherit what my husband had left us, and I hope to work even further and harder. So as for Tibetan issues, we hope that people would teach me, and I hope to work even harder. The technology is now making a huge progress. And as for human beings, are we progressing? Why aren't we having peace? Why are we always heartbroken? And from the Japanese side, the members here, Yamatani sensei, Santo sensei, Sakurai sensei, and myself, and of course, Otani sensei, we have so many powerful women here in Japan. So the Japanese women, let's unite and get together, and let us work even harder. I am not even a Diet member, but I am so honored to be able to stand here and to say a message. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Madam Abe, for your kind message and for your support to Tibet and the world peace. Now we have with us Reverend Otani Chojun, the 25th Chief Abbot of Higashi Honganji Temple. Reverend Otani-san, he is 96 years and old and a good friend of His Holiness Dalai Lama and Tibetan people. Reverend Otani Sensei, yoroshiku onegai shimasu.
Today, this is the 9th World Parliamentary Conference on Tibet in Tokyo. I extend my heartfelt congratulations on holding this conference. I fully agree with the purpose and the goal of this conference, and I am here to give my remarks in this way. On November 9, 2016, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama made an official visit to Higashiyama Joen Higashi Honganji, the world's largest and finest ossuary run by the Honganji Cultural Promotion Foundation, and had the opportunity to have an encounter with the Buddha's thoughts. On that occasion, His Holiness and I made the following joint declaration. The purpose of life is to be happy. Shakyamuni Buddha also taught the path of Buddhism that believed suffering and give happiness. To attain that happiness, it is important to feel gratitude and grace. Gratitude includes the gratitude of parents, siblings, spouses, teachers, and friends, and the gratitude of all living beings, other people, and of nature. A heart that feels gratitude is a heart of compassion and consideration. With this heart, we hereby declare that based on Buddhism, we will strive to create a better society and nation, and to make people all over the world happy. When we see or hear some kind of nasty reports on the internet, television, or in the newspapers every day, such as murder having occurred somewhere, bribery having taken place, or need to summon those who have made abusive remarks, we often talk about it with a few people, lament, and clench our teeth, and lament the world. But doing such things does not make the world a better place at all. In fact, in this way, we are searching for the seeds of misfortune. We are driving ourselves into misfortune. Isn't that most foolish? As stated in the joint statement that I mentioned, the purpose of human life is to be happy. This is the Buddha's teaching, and in order to be happy, a compassionate heart is essential. So, I believe that a compassionate heart is ultimately feeling gratitude and grace. Have we forgotten the importance of gratitude and grace for too long? Regarding grace, there is often talk of the four graces: the grace of parents, the grace of the king, the grace of teachers and friends, the grace of all living beings, and the grace of heaven, earth, and nature. There are phrases regarding grace such as repaying grace, or to repay gratitude, and knowing grace, to know gratitude. But I believe that the grace is something that is to be felt. So the phrase appreciating grace is more appropriate. I believe that the kanji characters for grace were originally used to translate the Sanskrit words from Buddhist scriptures such as ka, venting, and upakara, which seem to mean one who feels gratitude. Therefore, I think it would have been better to translate grace or in Japanese into Chinese characters appreciation of gratitude rather than repaying gratitude. In other words, I believe that for grace to exist, there must be a mutual understanding between the person who gives the grace and the person who receives it, and it feels grateful for it. Both parties must then rejoice and feel happy together. In other words, they need to have compassionate hearts that can communicate with each other, and I believe this opens the way for everyone to be happy. Otani Chojun, Chief, 24th Chief Abbot of Higashi Honganji Temple. Thank you very much.
Reverend Otani Sensei, thank you very much for your warm message and your explanation about the gratitude and your experience about meeting with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We wish you a long and healthy life with His Holiness to 113 or more years. Thank you very much. So now we have a video message from Honorable Michael McCaul, a member of U.S. House of Representatives, a great supporter of Tibetan cause. Please, his message, please.
Tashe Delek. I'm Congressman Michael McCaul, Chairman Emeritus of the House Foreign Affairs Committee in the United States Congress, and an unwavering friend of the Tibetan people. It's really an honor to speak to you today, and I'm moved that so many global leaders have gathered to support the Tibetan people's quest for their freedom. Last year, I had the privilege of leading a bipartisan congressional delegation to Dharamshala, India, where we met with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. As you know, nearly 66 years ago, the CCP annexed Tibet and slaughtered tens of thousands of innocent Tibetans and monks. To save his people, His Holiness led thousands of Tibetans on a perilous journey through the Himalayas, reaching safety in India. These brave souls left everything behind with the hope of preserving their way of life. Despite facing so much persecution and violence at the hands of the CCP, His Holiness has maintained inner peace and continues to preach compassion, something we could all learn from. He reminds us that even if the CCP takes your land, they cannot take away your culture or your spirit. And they cannot take away what the Tibetan people mean to the rest of the world. Still, the CCP's continued oppression against Tibet cannot stand. For years, I've fought against their tyranny and stood up for the people of Tibet. And last year, Congress passed my bill, the Promoting a Resolution to the Tibet-China Dispute Act. This bill makes clear that the United States believes Tibet has a right to its own unique language, religion, culture, and self-determination. It also strongly condemns CCP propaganda that pushes fake narratives about Tibet, like the claim that, quote, Tibet has been part of China since ancient times, end of quote. And it also requires that the State Department aggressively challenge those false narratives around the world. In my private meeting with His Holiness, I presented him with the wind chimes that play the song, America the Beautiful. Just as wind is not always seen, it is powerfully felt. And I told him the United States will always be a strong force standing behind the Tibetan people. His Holiness is filled with compassion I've seen in the eyes of Tibetans living in exile around the world. And I'm proud to advocate for Tibetans in the United States Congress. I will continue to stand with you until the Dalai Lama and his people can return to their homeland in peace. So let me say thank you, and let me close by saying Tuje Che. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Congressman Michael McCaul. Next, we have a video message from Honorable Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Emerita of the U.S. House of Representatives. Here is the message.
Hello. As Speaker Emerita of the United States House of Representatives, it is my privilege to address the 9th World Parliamentary Convention on Tibet and join such esteemed parliamentarians and society leaders and defenders of human rights. Let me begin by expressing my deep gratitude to the Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile and to our friends in the Japanese Parliamentary Support Group for Tibet for convening this essential gathering. It is a special privilege to once again stand in solidarity with the brave people of Tibet and to reaffirm our shared commitment to justice, democracy, and dignity. On behalf of the many friends in the U.S. Congress, let me also thank Sikong Penpa Sering for his recent visit to Washington. When we passed the Resolve Tibet Act in 2024, it was in large measure because of the outside mobilization for which he was largely responsible. I was honored to meet with him during his time in the United States. His voice continues to be a moral compass in the world too often clouded by complacency. From Tibet to Hong Kong, and from the Uyghur region to southern Mongolia, the Chinese Communist Party continues to campaign its campaign of repression and cultural erasure. But in the face of such oppression, the courage of the Tibetan people shines as a beacon to the world. As parliamentarians, we carry special responsibility. We are the elected representatives of free people, and with that freedom comes a duty to speak out against tyranny. We must call out the Chinese government's human rights abuse in Tibet, demand accountability, and ensure our own governments are not complicit. If we do not speak out against Chinese human rights violations due to commercial interest, then we lose all moral authority to call out any nation's human rights abuses. Let me be clear. The PRC's occupation of Tibet is illegal. It must never be legitimized. Tibetans have the inalienable right to self-determination, rooted in international law and grounded in truth. Legislators around the world must affirm that right, pass legislation to reflect that reality, and ensure their governments recognize Tibet as an occupied land, not a province of China. And we must be unequivocal in our rejection of the CCP's outrageous claim that it can select the next Dalai Lama. That right belongs only to the Tibetan people and their spiritual leaders. For Beijing to interfere is not only an act of religious persecution, it's an assault on freedom of conscience everywhere. If the Chinese Communist Party can dictate who leads a major world religion, then no faith is safe from authoritarian control. We must also challenge the PRC's revisionist history, the false narrative that Tibet has always been a part of China. This lie is used to justify oppression. By defending the historical truth, we protect not just Tibet's rightful status, we defend the integrity of our international norms and the principle that truth matters. Today, we stand at a global crossroads between democracy and autocracy, between human rights and repression. The Tibetan people remind us what it means to choose peace, dignity, and dialogue in the face of violence and injustice. Together, as parliamentarians, we must deepen our ties with the Tibetan Parliament in exile, collaborate across borders, and raise our collective voices louder and stronger, because the cause of Tibet is the cause of freedom itself. Thank you, and best wishes for a successful conference.
Thank you, Honorable Madam Nancy Pelosi. We will always remember you for your strong and undaunted support of Tibet. Now, as you may be well aware, this year is His Holiness Dalai Lama's 90th birthday, and the year is designated as a year of compassion. Tibetans and supporters around the world will be celebrating different events. And today, we have a special message from His Holiness Dalai Lama for this conference. And I request Honorable Dolma Sering Tekan, Deputy Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile, to read the message. Dolma Sering La, thank you.
Message. I send my greetings to the members of parliament from different countries who are assembling in Tokyo for the 9th World Parliamentarians Convention on Tibet. The support of people's representative is something that I particularly value and is of enormous significance to us Tibetans. Today, the world is going through very challenging times. Sadly, there seems to be no end in sight to the use of violence in settling problems and disputes between countries and even among opposing groups within individual countries. The history shows that violence only breeds more violence. We must therefore make concerted efforts to resolve problems and disputes through dialogue in a spirit of reconciliation and understanding. We Tibetans are committed to seeking a mutually acceptable solution with a peaceful, non-violent path to achieve freedom and dignity for the Tibetan people. The spirit of Tibetans in Tibet remains firm like a mountain. Their dedication to our cause is strong, unwavering, and determined as it is based on truth and justice. I am hopeful that the Chinese people will recognize this. Ours is the peaceful struggle of a people with their own language, profound philosophy, and rich culture. Tibetan Buddhism is a complete form of Buddhism based on reasoning and logic. It is a tradition that preserves and develops the pure teaching derived from the historic ancient University of Nalanda. Central to this is the cultivation of compassion and concern for the welfare of all beings. Today, there is growing interest among Chinese people in Buddhism, which is part of their inherited spiritual culture. In addition, there is widespread interest among scientists in Buddhist philosophy and psychology. Being conscious of the importance of education that nurtures the heart as well as the mind, I have encouraged initiatives such as the teaching of social and emotional learning in schools. I hope that in the interest of creating a better future, we will be able to incorporate such human values as kindness and integrity into mainstream education curriculums over a period of time. In conclusion, I want to thank you all once again for your steadfast support for the just cause of Tibetan people. I believe that the truth will ultimately prevail. With my prayers and good wishes for the success of your deliberation, Dalai Lama, 16th May 2025.
Thank you, Deputy Speakers, and thank you, His Holiness, for the warm and inspiring message. Your Holiness' message will be the guiding force for this 2 days conference. Now, we would like to screen a 30-minute video titled Democracy, the Gift of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama to Tibet. I hope you will all enjoy it.
먼저 좀 최식으로 나는데 대자 뭐 망조 가는 로 가야지. 단 점니 군세리 점니 참을로. 다 첨비 미지 네베 차로도 여도 유지리디 이내 강다 망조 타는 로 돼야 돼. 다 약수 차되기 하래. 자 드네 뭐 인도잖아요. 망조 배바 있니. 점니 찌도 첨비지 그 랑가는 로 가야 돼. 샤케시 뭐리.
His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama began planning for a future democratic Tibet years before the Chinese invasion. By the mid-1950s, he had established a number of committees to implement a series of land, tax, and other political reforms. He found inspiration during his first visit to one of the world's youngest democracies, India.
nga tümse ke mari di ne da zozol dawa chinche a ji tombre so da ngona jane ge rawa damju rawa ji mangzo se da di keze ji ge ga so le gezen yode ba de 7岁 nang se che toya de ya de mo sa ji ya ru chu
But before the young Dalai Lama could bring his vision of a democratic Tibet to fruition, China's illegal occupation of his country forced him to seek refuge in exile in the March of 1959. The government of India generously opened its doors to him and the 80,000 Tibetans who spilled over the Himalayan passes fleeing persecution. His Holiness the Dalai Lama faced the daunting task of being responsible for the welfare of this huge refugee population and to find ways to provide them with education, housing, and employment while working to preserve the profound and ancient Tibetan Buddhist culture that was being systematically destroyed in Tibet. However, his vision of a Tibetan democracy was never far from his mind. Less than a year after he left Tibet, the 25-year-old leader made his first public announcement of his plans to democratize the Tibetan government. In the year 1960, Tibet's first elected body, the Commission of Tibetan People's Deputies, took their oath of office on September 2nd, a date that is celebrated every year as the Tibetan Democracy Day. On March 10, 1963, the 4th anniversary of the Tibetan People's Uprising, the fledgling Tibetan government finalized a charter that became Tibet's first constitution. The charter is based on the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, guaranteeing equality before the law and freedom of expression, assembly, and religion. But along with the modern norms of democracy, the Central Tibetan Administration has incorporated an article that is unique among modern political constitutions: that Tibetan polity shall be based upon the principle of non-violence. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has always initiated and occasionally found the need to encourage the Tibetan community to take up democratic principles.
개인이 고도도 이나다 겨울무치기 다 개로 조키야 디파 샤제 다 망조 디치고기 사기 섬주 용야디 또시 농구지가 로리야 뭐줄 소리 좀 고도도 내려 충분해 나디 파지 추주 리지리도안에 아주 마음에 쩌짐 신지시 sö제 디닝도지 파지 추주 리승로리 뭐 마사라체리 디나라 겨울무치고 왕저디 아니 그게 계시는 그게 거바로 충분히나 아니 겨울무치 왕저디 두주단 거야 사실 계시 다 되는 거 쪼래 들다 자 만나러네 합탁다 막고메 소식.
In the first 30 years of exile, the road to democracy was rather slow. All the ministers of the cabinet were still appointed by His Holiness, and there was little financial accountability to the parliament. In the year 1990, His Holiness the Dalai Lama expanded the number of parliamentary members. He gave them independent authority to appoint members of the cabinet and increased their power of legislation, policy making, and financial control. He also sought to give women a greater voice in the government. The establishment of elected local assemblies helped to strengthen democracy at the grassroots level and allowed for the democratic participation of all Tibetans. In the year 2001, His Holiness requested the Parliament to revise the Charter and provide for Tibet's first public election of the Chief Cabinet Minister, equivalent to a Prime Minister.
내가 순계 다 쉽게 말씀드리려야 겨울무치 추진이 고치신 독스 침벌이 그거래 대지 편도 전부 중요기리. 그래도 이내 다지 주주 열리는 주시리. 아니 나도 뭐 내줄이야. 겨울무치에서니 지금 미지 파리에 뱅게로 참모배도 뿡대로 소리 쉐빈 뒤 라는 момент 하네 있네. 되냐 그 주리. 아니 그 지금 가족을 떠주고 전에 따외 전에 쉐빈이다 가다 처진 섬담이 있는 거 아주 별까지 미망 랑황 탑주지래 마도 티 미개변이 좀 말이.
The exiled Tibetans from the 55 settlements in India, Nepal, and Bhutan, as well as those who had immigrated to countries as far-flung as Australia, America, and Norway, voted on their choice of candidates. It was a daunting task for the Election Commission to oversee a free and fair elections of a people who are scattered all over the world. On the 20th of August 2001, the Election Commissioner announced that Professor Samdong Rinpoche would serve as Tibet's first elected Chief Cabinet Minister.
벽 첩식 구치 망주 유두단에 야레버 테마 당구차 되게 하리. 다디 문에 시시점을 지다 럽점을 차 되게 하리.
Tibet has now taken its place alongside the democracies of the modern world.
다디고 롱아르 상리야 유두신 라든지다 땀부직도 차윤두산에 가다 겨울지 연애래 매내래 만주 벽이 전주 첩시 직중로 한데 땀 싸된 푹불지 고 차대지.
The Central Tibetan administration consists of three bodies: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. The Tibetan Parliament is the legislative body representing Tibetans both inside and outside Tibet. The Kashak or cabinet consists of 8 ministers, including the directly elected Prime Minister or Kalun Tripa, is responsible for 7 administrative departments: Department of Religion and Culture, Department of Home, Department of Finance, Department of Education, Department of Security, Department of Information and International Relations, and Department of Health.
아니 디 야게직디 진용가샤 차드기요레 엔 진용가샤 나로레야 저림 시송 셔베이네 시경 직당 아니 망탈라 칼렌드 도시네 담슈요레 아니 칼렌 예 단행아 메도 만조치 추리레고 나시레고 시리레고 벤조레고 아니 대송레고 단 최대레고 스토시제 치리레고 시도시네 가다 뜻행아 듀인 체베 칼렌저리 chen 도시니 시경그 민트 아니 저저기 메트나니 야면은 가고나와인 담토고요 말이 아니 가고 중앙에는 의로고요 가고만 중앙에는 지명 담도고요래 뒤에서 뭐들 체체 담니 당한 저기 랭게 나오네 조 2차 되고요 직디 아니 표에 관용 세야디 되게 개체슈다 랭게 지슈들이 엔 샤바디다 미망 되던 다이즈레 뒤에서 뭐 용가샤 레던 지쇼디 아니 간을 남았어다 레지소 상물로 투몽고 토네 이거 연봉 체체에 나가셔고 했기 때문에 점리 샤바기 지수다 지부시간에 신슈에
The cabinet can introduce bills and motions and participate in deliberations, but has no right to vote. Finally, the Supreme Justice Commission functions as an arbitration court within the parameters of Indian law, handling civil and administrative cases.
네, 제도 팀시강 게 단다 와라 샤몰라 단다 팀시바 고주 팀시바 제 아니 산이 팀시 강라니 여레 아니 산이 팀시 강라 단다 다대차라 산이 팀시 강 숨차도 제도 팀시 강라 네 쳔바도 니 팀데 쳔바다 징용 쳔바다니 니
The 3 independent bodies of election, audit, and public service commissions ensure fair elections, fiscal accountability, and procedural transparency. The parliament, known as the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile, meets twice a year in March and in September, and is responsible for the accountability of the administration on political matters and social welfare. The Parliament also ratifies policies and has the power to impeach the heads of the independent bodies, the Justice Commissioners, and the Cabinet. Apart from the business inside the House, The Tibetan Parliament also advocates for the cause of Tibet around the world, visiting and receiving parliamentarians from various governments and organizing conferences such as the World Parliamentarians Convention on Tibet.
A Syrian-Armenian poet said,
The Parliament members regularly visit the Tibetan settlements and bring public grievances and suggestions to the notice of the administration. When Parliament is not in session, the 11-member Standing Committee meets twice a week to deliberate on day-to-day issues. The Public Accounts Committee, Budget Estimates Committee, and other special committees are constituted from time to time.
Timti Shisungki, Pimetu Yone, Chate Chayare, Lekumala, the Chebe, Pake Kature, Kayure, Tige Samalo, Chitu Gulene, any Tibetan Goguyori, Katuna Goguyori, Tishisunki, the Jagal Nesan Jagarki Nanglolia, any Jagatuso, Katu Subine, any Pudun Shuduki Linguti, Gulek Tone Nan Goguyori, Tine, any Di Chelia, the Sane Tuso Kati, Chiduki, Tegar Dancing Wall, you do. Sane Tuzo Kaglen don't come la, and a chick, two ship getone, like Penny Gogilam, don't pugoyeti yeti, Gulegatone to spugure.
There are a total of 38 local assemblies and 77 Tibetan freedom movements in India, Nepal, and Bhutan, which are being administered by the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile. The Secretariat, headed by the Secretary General and the staff, carry out all administrative functions, including documentation and dissemination of parliamentary procedure under the guidance of the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker. Members of the Parliament are elected by a system that is designed to fit the unique situation of a government operating outside of the country it represents. Members of Parliament are not elected based on regional populations such as in a federal democracy, nor on a party affiliation in a system of proportional representation, since the Tibetan government has no political parties. In the Tibetan government system, the three main Tibetan provinces are represented by the same number of members, irrespective of the size of the population of these provinces, in a system that is similar to the way that the United States senators are elected to the Senate. Every 5 years, general elections are held for the members of Parliament and the Sikyong in one day all over the world, except inside Tibet. Lay and the ordained Tibetans in India, Nepal, and Bhutan collectively elect 10 members from each of the 3 traditional provinces in Tibet, Yuzhang, Kham, and Amdo. In addition to voting on their provincial representatives, the Tibetan clergy are allowed to elect 10 more members, 2 from each of the 5 religious traditions, Nyingma, Kagyu, Sakya, Geluk, and Pön. Tibetans in North America elect 2 members, so do Tibetans in Europe. 1 representative is elected from Australasia. A fairly recent development is for the members of Parliament to be given the responsibility of earmarked territories in exile, so they can look after the interests of those constituencies. Thus, a member of Parliament who is elected by the people from Central Tibet, for example, can also look after the interests of Tibetans who are living in an area of South India, regardless of the Tibetan region that the member of Parliament is from. Over the decades, His Holiness the Dalai Lama increased the amount of responsibility that he gave to the elected Tibetan leadership. And since the first democratically elected Kalan Tripa, or the Prime Minister, in the year 2001, His Holiness the Dalai Lama had described himself as being in a semi-retirement from Tibetan political affairs. Gradually, His Holiness the Dalai Lama announced the devolution of his political role and his complete retirement from political life. On March 11, 2011, His Holiness issued a statement addressed to the Tibetan Parliament, informing his decision to devolve the political authority to the elected leaders and advised to make necessary changes in the charter to relieve him of his political authority. The 14th Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile unanimously approved in its session to plea His Holiness the Dalai Lama to continue holding his political authority. A number of petitions and requests were put forward by the Tibetans both inside and outside Tibet, including an appeal from the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile requesting His Holiness to continue his role as the political leader of the Tibetan people. But His Holiness declined and clarified his stance during a public teaching on March 19th.
Gyalwangi pe chusi nigi uti naya de chabare tanga Gyalwangabe kendrin chushib chade yare da Gyalwangi kendrin chushib chade yare so dinde yinde Gyalwang kundrin jigi da tangdola gashin troshin bobe thane Gyalwangi pe chusi nigi uti sayade dupso jemna shindu ebare 미수 찌기 셔야 요말 띵내 타제 도그래 내 타제 다 벽이 철수기 랭겐디 망주톤의 위두체베 구치기 왕차 쌍막히는 거야지 마도 내때 지금 그게 간다 이제나 겨울음치야 무트는 지금 철수기 구치 임베 남바데 레다나 지금 슈구직 하대가 소리 차이. 뒤당 내봐도 뒤주 당거리. 뒤주 당야 뒤에 안 들레베 소리도. 자 뒤에인데 딘데가 타네 memang 그 감을 챘네 여때에 달라라면 디커도 때다 룩니기 우치레사게 추시니기 우치레사데 다 참샤샤나 시지 데베타네. 아다 나도 남주 손도도 사배 거돌이야. 손도 저서 손도 슈그를 때 손도 개량 안에 들어 있어도와 어디 뒤는 시체니 경험하네 마 추시 니기 우치 전에 다 로시비 하서 심버디 다 개량 안에 잠샤 중나 시지르바.
His Holiness made it clear that although he was relieving himself from any direct political involvement as relating to the laws and legislation of the Tibetan government in exile, as the Dalai Lama, he would continue to serve as an active spokesperson for the Tibetan cause.
나 강점배 유미차대야래. 강점배 사야 주 지원남 비미 지원남대 용서로다 별집에 더다게 겐티대야래. 그래서 나 차샤네 별 지원남된게 미 재직 차대야래. 도면 암도 유는 연배 배바시 차대야래. 강점배 차대야래. 나 뭐시부터 겐티 여러와.
관세청은 좀 쳐. 안에 배도 배민관쇼다. 안에 배미 ngо다 지진 천지. 근데 이마인데 배낭마저 고던 기반나이 ndamiheba te logic shunrobre region 배민근데 jel토바인데 내가저 chatting 텐전 동빈 놀라. 안에 텐전 숨치 산주슈에 텐전 동보데 배미데데 섬시 여자다 최도리요 리네지 손쇼 답변다 백이 짜된 도도진 천 안에 배미다 배미 진주기 레된 공지토라 갈로람된다 그자난죠 니 텐전 님바데 constitution 좀 초기 개간 남지 겁다 아니 고티 남게 손대 남힐라 베지자된 도도진 쳔비 아니 레된 계지토라 배미 진주도 아니 배미 마비 체도 아니 저조도 가샤게 공비 제기를 공자노죠 tenzo somebade permit jinzu da permit gi chedo jashi uti namba ne daga no yige ne menaka jante kodur da ne kasha gi konzu shebe kozob tenje da mese kozo nola konza shonge chimo choge kozob jin chene zajo tension ne azo tenzo sum de sanju hyotoba shongere ne azo shil ni don jujiki 신당 아비기 tenye gi tsabune zanzin latar hyore. Ana constitution ko choki ta goba jonze tumal zine mozu suza no na hingi mozu pemi yanji mozu todonda ngengur ninga yamarare tone lonsu chetup gayade kechemo chadere.
The 14th Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile decided to form a Charter Review Committee. Consequently, the Second Tibetan National General Meeting was convened from 21st to 24th May 2011. The meeting discussed the amendment of His Holiness's political authority in the Charter and decided to plea His Holiness to at least continue holding political authority in a ceremonial capacity. The 14th Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile convened an additional parliament session to make the 25th Charter Amendment to transfer all political authorities of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to the leaders directly elected by the Tibetan people and the democratically elected leadership. On 29th May, His Holiness the Dalai Lama signed the document formally transferring his temporal authority to the democratically elected leaders. The Parliament approved the change of name Tibetan Government in Exile to Central Tibetan Administration and the motto on the official emblem Gande Poda Chole Namgel to Demba Ni Nambar Gelgurjik. With the amendments in the Charter, Kalun Tripa will approve and promulgate the bills and regulations passed by the Tibetan Parliament in Exile. Likewise, the Kalun Tripa will appoint not more than 7 Kaluns for his or her cabinet to be approved by the Parliament. Oath of office administered by His Holiness the Dalai Lama was to be commissioned by the Chief Justice Commissioner of the Tibetan Supreme Justice Commission. Convention of biannual parliamentary sessions and additional sessions summoned by His Holiness the Dalai Lama was to be summoned by the Tibetan Parliament in Exile. Similarly, as per the need, the Kashak, the Speaker, and the Deputy Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament in Exile may call a special general meeting of Tibetan public, which was previously done by His Holiness. The Chief Justice Commissioner, other 2 Justice Commissioners of the Tibetan Supreme Justice Commission, and heads of the autonomous bodies appointed by His Holiness the Dalai Lama was to be voted by the Tibetan Parliament in Exile. If the requisite quorum is not met, the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker can postpone the parliamentary session for more than 7 days, which was previously done in consultation with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The outcome of popular referendum initiated through the Central Tibetan Election Commission has to be signed and announced by the Sikyong, which was earlier done by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The 15th Tibetan Parliament in Exile amended the official title of Kalun Tripa to Sikyong Political Leader, and the strength of the members of Parliament was increased to 45. Dr. Lobsang Sengye became the first Sikyong of the Central Tibetan Administration after the Charter Amendment on the 8th of August 2011, and served as the Sikyong for 2 consecutive terms from the year 2011 to 2016 and the year 2016 to 2021 for the 14th and the 15th Kashak. On 27th May 2021, Pemba Tsering, the current Sikyong of the Central Tibetan Administration, was sworn in as the Sikyong of the 16th Kashak by the Tibetan Supreme Justice Commissioner. The transfer of all political authorities of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to the leaders directly elected by the Tibetan people vests in them the competence to represent all Tibetans in Tibet and in exile, and to fulfill their public service. When the opportunity arises, the present government will dissolve and a new one will be formed with the participation of Tibetans from both inside and outside Tibet.
I hope you all like it. So this is how the democracy evolved in and came from top to bottom in Tibetan community. And we deeply thank His Holiness Dalai Lama for all his effort in making the Tibetan aspiration alive, relevant, and vibrant, and for making this world a better place to live in. So with this, the member of the Tibetan Parliament, they are offering the Tibetan Kata, and we come to the end of the opening session of this conference, and there is a present before you on your table. So this is a little token from the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile, and then like, after this, we will have a group photo, and we request all the Member of Parliament, distinguished guests, to put on their kata and come here so that we can have a group photo together. And with this, we end the opening session. I thank all the distinguished speakers for their wonderful remarks and the welcome addresses. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, group photo.